Welcome to Microscopic Marvels.
All right, everyone. Today, we're jumping into a super important topic in forensic medicine, blunt force injuries. Trust me, understanding these is absolutely essential for your exams, so let's break down the key concepts you really need to nail. So, here's the plan. We'll start with a quick overview of what blunt force injuries even are. Then, we'll dive into the three main types you'll see all the time: abrasions, contusions, and lacerations. And to wrap it all up, we'll hit some key differentiations that are crucial to master for your exams.
Okay, first things first. Let's get the fundamentals down.
So everything we're talking about today, it all falls under this big umbrella term, mechanical injury. And it's pretty simple, really. It just means that some kind of physical force has hit the body and caused some damage. And blunt force trauma, that's one of the biggest categories we see.
Okay, so when we talk about blunt force injuries, we usually break them down into four main groups. You've got your abrasions, think of them as scrapes. Then there are contusions, which you probably know as bruises. Next up are lacerations, which are actual tears in the tissue. And of course, you've got fractures of the bone. For this session, though, we're really going to zero in on those first three.
Let's kick things off with abrasions. Now, these are the most common type of blunt force injury you're going to see. And they're super important because they can give us some major clues about what happened, like which direction the force came from. From a medico-legal standpoint, that's absolutely vital information.
So what exactly is an abrasion? Well, you can think of it as a scrape that takes off the very top layer of your skin, the epidermis. And here's the key thing to remember. As long as the damage is only in the epidermis, it's going to heal up just fine, no scar. But the moment that injury goes deeper into the dermis, that's when you're looking at a definite scar.
You know, one of the coolest things about abrasions is that you can actually get a pretty good idea of how old they are just by looking at the scab color. It starts out reddish-brown, then over a few days, around day 4 or 5, it darkens to brown, and by the end of the week, it's turned black. This little color timeline is an amazing tool for figuring out when something happened.
Okay, this is a huge one for exams. You have to be able to tell the difference between an injury that happened before death, antemortem, and one that happened after, postmortem. See, an antemortem abrasion shows what we call a vital reaction. That's the body's living response, right? Bleeding, inflammation, the whole deal. A postmortem abrasion, on the other hand, has none of that. It looks totally different, kind of dry and yellowish, almost like parchment paper. That's just the exposed dermis drying out.
All right, we've covered the surface stuff. Now let's go a little deeper. It's time to talk about contusions, or as most of us call them, bruises. And believe me, if you learn how to read a bruise, it can tell you a surprisingly detailed story.
So, what's going on with a contusion? Well, some kind of blunt force hits the body and breaks tiny blood vessels right under the skin. That blood then leaks out, the technical term is extravasates, into the tissues around it. And here's a major forensic clue. If you were to cut into a real bruise, you'd see clotted blood that's actually stuck in the tissue. You can't just wash it away.
Now, not all bruises are the same. We can group them in a few different ways. Some are right on the surface, some are deep, and those deep ones can actually take a few days to even show up. Then you've got patterned bruises, which are awesome because they can literally take the shape of the weapon, and then there are these weird ones called ectopic bruises, where the bruise shows up somewhere totally different from where the person was hit, all thanks to gravity.
Let me give you a classic example of a patterned bruise. It's called a railway line or tramline bruise. This happens when someone is hit with something round, like a rod. The force of the impact actually pushes the blood away from the center, which leaves a pale stripe right down the middle. Then you get two parallel lines of bruising on either side where all that displaced blood ended up. And what about an ectopic bruise? The textbook example is battle's sign. So imagine someone gets hit on the side of the head, and it causes a fracture at the base of the skull. The actual impact was on the side, but gravity pulls the leaking blood down, and it shows up as a bruise behind the ear. So the bruise isn't where the hit was. And seeing this sign tells you something very specific. The fracture is in the middle cranial fossa. Figuring out how old a bruise is? Another super high-yield topic for your exams. It's all about the chemistry of hemoglobin breaking down. Right at the beginning, it's red because of all the oxygen in the blood. Then, as it loses oxygen, it turns blue. After that, the body's cleanup crew gets to work, and you get this whole cascade of colors. It goes brown from hemosiderin, then green from hemodioin, and finally yellow from bilirubin. After about 2 weeks, it's gone. A great little mnemonic to remember this is RBBGYN. Now this is critical. Don't ever mix up a bruise with livor mortis. That's the pooling of blood that happens after death. Just remember this. A bruise is clotted blood that's outside the blood vessels because of an injury. Livor mortis is unclotted blood still inside the vessels that's just settled with gravity. So what does that mean? If you make a cut, the bruise stays put, but the blood from livor mortis, it'll just wash right away.
Okay, last up, let's talk about what happens when the blunt force is so strong it actually tears the skin. We're talking about a laceration. And this is a whole different ballgame compared to what we've just discussed.
So here's a question that trips up a lot of people, not just on exams, but in the real world too. A laceration is a tear from something blunt, an incised wound is a cut from something sharp. They can look similar, so how do you tell the difference?
The secret is to look really closely at the details of the wound. A laceration is going to have these messy, irregular, bruised edges. But the absolute giveaway, the thing that proves it's a laceration, is something you find inside the wound. They're called tissue bridges. These are these tiny little strands of nerves and blood vessels that got stretched and crushed, but not sliced clean through. When you see tissue bridges, you know 100% that it was a blunt object, not a sharp one.
A perfect example, and one you've got to know, is the split laceration. You see this where the skin is stretched tight over a bone, like on your scalp. The skin gets squished between the blunt weapon and the hard bone underneath, and it just splits open. And here's the tricky part. It can look deceptively clean, almost like a knife cut. But if you grab a hand lens and look close, you'll always find those telltale tissue bridges deep inside. Okay, let's bring it all home. We're going to do a quick-fire review of the most important comparisons. These are the things you'll definitely see on your exams.
Now, this one is really interesting because it has a huge medical legal angle. How to spot a fake injury. Someone might try to create an artificial bruise, maybe using some kind of plant juice. But here's how you can tell. The fake one will have really neat, regular margins, and it's full of inflammatory fluid, not actual clotted blood. And the biggest clue? It won't go through that RBBGY color change, and the person will probably say it's itchy, not painful.
So, if you remember nothing else, remember this. Let's boil it down to the one-liners. For abrasions, you age them by the scab color, red to brown to black. For contusions, you age them by the bruise color. That's our RBBGYN mnemonic. For lacerations, you identify them by looking for those irregular margins and tissue bridges. And the golden rule, antemortem injuries, injuries before death, will always show a vital reaction.
If you liked this video, then please like, comment, and subscribe.